Running, the adventure, the places, the people. Sometimes do you ever think, thank God for running? Hello and welcome to the Ultra Running Podcast with me, Coach Marshy. Welcome back to the show. It has been a while, and I restart the show with some great news for me on a personal level. When I was last recording the show, unfortunately, I was really struggling to get in any sort of rhythm due to a hallucis longus injury on the big toe and plantar fasciitis. And I'm pleased to say that the running is back and the consistency is coming. So it's all good news and full speed ahead for me personally. What about you guys? The show is back. We want to hear your comments, whatever platform you're listening to it or watching it on. Please do throw comments in there. I know that lots of you got used to listening to the show and sending in questions and things that you wanted me to ask the guests as well. So do that and continue to do that. So we're going to welcome in our guest for today. So hello, Rhi. How are you?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you. Welcome to the show. So I'm going to ask you a question before we even let the guys know who you are and where you're from. We're going to talk about what running means to you. So what does running mean to you?
Yeah, sure. So I think for me, running is just a huge sense of consistency. So one of the things that got me into running initially was the fact that you can just do it anywhere. You don't need a lot of fancy kit. You don't need certain weather conditions, and you can do it with anyone. And I love the sense of kind of freedom that it can give you, or you can kind of adapt it for whatever you're looking for in the day. It can be about kind of really serious, hardcore training, or it can just be about going out and getting a bit of fresh air and a bit of headspace.
Yeah,
Um,
nice.
and yeah, just having kind of having it as a source of consistency in your life, I think is so important and powerful. And tying back to that idea of thank God for running, it's that thing that you can always go back to and get a sense of release.
Yeah. And I like the word consistency because people would probably think of that in terms of literal training and being consistent in training. But I think you're talking about the wider sort of life and how it can fit in around life and help with life every day.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. Nail on the head.
Yeah, no, cool. So tell the listeners and the viewers who are you, where you from, what do you do as a sort of day-to-day thing for your life, and then we'll talk about running a bit more.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So I live in North Wales. I've been here for about 10 years now. I'm from Kent originally, so I kind of moved from a very flat but lovely seaside area to a very mountainous seaside area. And I've actually just finished qualifying as a physiotherapist. So I start with the NHS here next week. But before that, I worked in psychological research at the uni here. So I looked at a lot of kind of psychological well-being and healthy lifestyle activities.
Cool. So actually, both of those things, former and future, are very much linked to running or have aspects linked to running that could be handy. So that could be good,
Yeah.
I guess, for your own training as well. In terms of your running kind of life and your running journey and your running age, how much of part of your life has this been? How long's it been there? Give us a bit of
Uh,
background.
yeah, good question. So I kind of dabbled in running a lot, but very on and off. And kind of quite sporadically, like the kind of runs where you sprint for a minute and then walk for 5 minutes and then sprint again. Just having fun with it really when I was a teenager. And then consistently running for about the last 6 years.
Cool. And how did that journey start? Where did you start? Obviously, you mentioned the sort of faster runs for about a minute and then a walk, run, walk kind of principle. But did it start off becoming a bit more regular because you were doing an event, or was it just because you wanted it for headspace? What was the sort of the start of that journey?
Yeah, so there were kind of a couple of factors. One of the main ones was getting into park run. Which is actually something that I ended up looking at as part of my research, and parkrun being kind of a different style of running event in that it's very much, again, adaptable to whatever an individual person is looking to get out of it. So it might be like, we know plenty of people that will go to parkrun and try and get their 5K PB and look at it as a really useful training tool. But then again, plenty of other people that will just go to enjoy it and see their mates and have a stroll around in some nice green space. So yeah, kind of parkrun was a good factor behind me kind of running more regularly, week in, week out kind of thing. And then I joined a running club, local running club, met some lovely people through that. And actually my boss at the time was really into running, and I always thought he had a brilliant work-life balance, because I think working in research, you don't kind of have a 9-to-5 style job. It's quite easy for your work to kind of spill over into your kind of playtime. And he was great at really encouraging me to explore my hobbies and do things like go for a run after work or in the middle of the workday, and just kind of refresh myself in that way.
So you mentioned the park run and the research and your former sort of what you did in your research around psychology. So can you elaborate at all on that and summarize what it was, or are you not able to say?
Yeah, no, I can definitely talk about it. So my research at that time was kind of looking at the link between well-being and physical activity. And I think we typically look at that in terms of participating in sport, whatever it is, or doing any kind of exercise can have these amazing benefits for your mental health. And this was almost kind of flipping that on its head and looking at, if you help someone to feel better mentally, then are they then more likely to take care of themselves across the board? So maybe be more interested in doing sport, maybe have a better diet, all these kind of things that you then kind of get a positive cycle between the two, and everything kind of just continues to improve. So parkrun, we looked at the factors that made people more regularly attend over time, and then also just kind of had a bit of a chat about people really and asked them what they liked about it and what they thought was special about it and different to other events. And the main things that came out were people were most likely to keep on going if they found it fun. That was one kind of factor, but actually the most important thing was if they found it meaningful. And by that I mean kind of if they felt like it was important for a reason beyond just themselves, and kind of built towards any kind of longer term goals that they had. And I think one of the lovely things about parkrun is that it's this really organic thing that's just grown from a couple of mates having run in a park, and that building and building and building to this huge international thing. And it's such a community that people can be part of. They can run it, they can volunteer and give back to the other runners there. And you get all generations, people bring their dogs. So it's just a lovely atmosphere to be in.
Yeah. Did parkrun show any interest in the research?
Yeah. So they've actually got a huge research hub. I think it's becoming something that's more and more interesting to researchers to have a look at. And I think you can maybe compare parkrun to other healthy behaviour initiatives that may be more formal but haven't been so successful. And it's really interesting for those initiatives to look at what parkrun's done well and try and replicate that in what they do. So yeah, parkrun, we sent a kind of a little blurb of the research off to parkrun and wrote a little blog on it. And I think it's something that probably might not come as a massive surprise to parkrun, the research findings. I don't think it's ever something that they consciously set out to do. Like I said, it's this really organic thing that's mates getting together, going for a run, and then lots of other people thinking, oh, I'd like to join in with that as well. But I think they're probably aware now of actually what a significant impact they're having, and also very conscious of keeping that ethos of it being super chilled, and really welcoming, really inclusive.
Yeah, and I'm very aware, and I'm sure you are, and the listeners, about your Mark Zuckerbergs, your Elon Musks, and people that have changed the world. But in a in a way, I like to think of something like Parkrun as having done that at a certain level as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like, when I was writing the research about it, I was almost kind of comparing it to not a religion per se, like not some weird cult or anything, but it's something that kind of what I was referencing about in the beginning, that you can go there every week. It's almost always on, even kind of Christmas, New Year. The only thing that stops it up here is if the weather's really bad and trees are going to fall down.
Yeah.
But it's that very, very reliable thing that people can do and see people that they know week in, week out, and get that lovely sense of community connection.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I've spent plenty of time at park runs, various places across the country in my period of time as well. And I'd agree with all of that. And like you said, that organic growth, they didn't necessarily set out to achieve this, but look what it's achieving, and just the people that we probably individually know locally and the impact it has on them, let alone doing that across the UK and then across the world. That's an even bigger achievement. And the nice thing is they probably didn't even have that on their agenda. So, I love Parkrun, and I think that's really interesting to hear about your research and understand that, there are some things there like that meaningful part, and people finding it fun, being important. And, you've mentioned there a few times about the process as well of it being some part of something greater. Which probably leads us nicely into the next question, which is the ultra running world and your experience of that. So, what is if you can, in a kind of brief way over a couple of minutes max, really, is what is your experience of the ultra running world?
Oh, okay, cool. So I basically started ultra running largely because of Charlie, who is the guest on the previous podcast, and my
Yeah.
partner. So at the start of 2020, I said to Charlie, I'd done a couple of marathons before, and I said, I either want to do a half Ironman this year or an ultra marathon. And he'd had quite a lot of experience already. And then obviously a couple of months later, COVID hit, big lockdown, whispers of races coming back. But obviously nothing really happened for that entire year after that point and beyond. So my first ultra was actually just a really long run with Charlie, completely unorganized. So we like plotted the route and everything. So it wasn't until the following May that I did my first ultra. And since then, I think I've done about 5 or 6 other ultras on top of that. And it's a completely different experience to any of the running that I'd done before. So the marathon running, half marathons, a lot of road running. Most of my ultras have been pretty rural. And living in the mountains here, we absolutely love the mountain ultras. And I think in terms of, the kind of the ultra running world, the ultra running community, probably a lot of people look at ultra runners and think we're just absolutely mad. And I'm sure most ultra runners have probably had that conversation with someone that they know. But I think it's one of those things that when you experience it, you kind of don't go back. It's so addictive. And it's lovely to almost have this secret with other people that anyone can access. I really do believe that anyone could do an ultra if they had kind of the right conditions to support them. But not everyone knows how special it is until you do it.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And, touching on that, the 2020 bit in particular, and that lockdown, where you live, it's kind of set up. And the previous episode to this one with Charlie, as you say, he was a guest, and we talked about it a lot. Being in that lockdown in 2020 and wanting to get into ultra running, someone like me lives in Cambridgeshire, which is really flat. We can kind of go to Royston Heath in the next county and get a little bit of elevation, but right on your doorstep, you've got that there. So in that COVID time, I guess it was pretty well set up for you to kind of get practicing this ultra running sort of environment and the mountains around you. And I just wonder what your take on it was in terms of where you live and how you feel that could have helped you get into this or has given you any sort of advantage, or what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, 100%. Like it's, I think again, it almost wasn't something that we went about particularly consciously, but we almost had the perfect kind of training platform. So Charlie and I started off just doing lots of cycling when the roads were completely clear. There were like more bikes than cars on the roads here. To start off, and we just had this like a crazy, amazing hot weather that you just never get in Wales, really, for such a long period, like day after day after day for weeks. So we were doing loads of cycling then, just thinking, like obviously the magnitude of the situation just hit you and you think, this is terrible, but also this is kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity to go out and do this cycling and just experience the world. And I was working from home. Charlie was on furlough, so we suddenly had way more time, no commute, lots of flexibility to do loads of training. And I think the other part of it was that it became like a weekly ritual, really, to go out and just do these really, really long runs at the weekend because there wasn't anything else to do, really. We just get the DIY, but obviously no one was seeing anyone. And to be able to kind of plot these adventures from our front door that take us up into mountains, we got really creative with, well, Charlie did. Charlie's in charge of all the plotting and I just kind of follow along. But yeah, got really, really creative where we were going and what different routes we could do and different areas that we could go to that maybe we wouldn't have explored if we had the option of going anywhere and driving to different places. But I think that showed us some really, really beautiful things. So basically, to sum all of that up, during that period, I got this great cardiovascular base, I think, from doing all the cycling and kind of pushing the distance on that all the time. And having a very quiet life in many ways during lockdown, to be able to just run loads and that be a real event of the week is, where we're going to go for a long run and what we're going to eat afterwards.
Yeah, and we're a form of media, and COVID got a bad rap, rightly so. It was terrible what happened to people, but within that, there are these stories where it helped people and it changed people's life in a positive way.
Yeah.
And gave us a chance to maybe try things that we wouldn't, as you say, normally have the time for. So, it's really good to hear that. And it's a great story, actually. And what I'm going to do is I've asked you that question and I'm just going to give the listeners a bit of insight from my side because guests are really modest when they come on here and the ultra running world is like that. And that's something I really like about the ultra running community. But the truth is, Rhi, you're really good at it as well. Because guests I'm normally asked, do you know your guests before or have you ever met your guests in person? And sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is I meet them afterwards at the next event that we commonly are at or whatever. And the truth is I kind of stumbled across you and Charlie, and you'd just come out of registration for Ultra Trail Snowdonia. And little did I know that, and I don't know if you knew, but if you had a chance, but I was standing there talking to you guys, and I think you podiumed, didn't you?
I did, yeah. It was very, very unexpected, but I came second in the end.
In the 100K, right?
In the 100K, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it was a great story, and I remember having to shoot off on the Saturday night to get home, and obviously the results weren't fully in then. When I sort of left at 4:00 in the afternoon, and just then I saw and I was like, oh, I'm sure that's Rhi who we spoke to at the beginning on the Friday when they registered, and I think when we spoke, weren't they just calling the 100 miler in, weren't they, to cancel it?
Because of the weather.
Because of the weather.
Yeah.
And then it was all a bit like, is the 100K actually going to be able to start? Will the weather clear up? And of course, you guys went off at 4 a.m, so I didn't see any of the start of that. But you then came second, and was that quite a surprise then? Was that?
Oh, it was a huge surprise. Like I definitely wasn't confident when I was signing up for the 100. I was considering maybe doing the 50. And then, as what frequently happens, Charlie was signing up for the 100. So I was like, oh, maybe I could give it a punt. but yeah, definitely very nervous of it, and actually chatted to a few friends who kind of had good knowledge and said, "Oh, do you think I can actually finish it?" So yeah, going into it, I definitely still had concerns about making it to the end. I think the longest race that I'd done before it was the lap, which is around Lake Windermere,
Yeah.
and that's 47 miles, and I've taken around about 10 hours to do that previously. So with the increased elevation, increased distance, it's definitely quite a lot longer and bigger than anything I've done before. So yeah, just absolutely beyond any expectation I had, way beyond.
Yeah. And for people that aren't aware, but most of the ultra world will probably know that Ultra Trail Snowdonia UTS last year was actually one of the new UTMB series races. So does that mean you've qualified for a place in Chamonix?
It does, yeah. So I'll be doing the CCC in Chamonix this year. So
Nice.
that's my A race for this year. Very excited.
So we're now in 2023. So you are now probably fully into the training cycle for that race.
Oh, well, you say that, but I haven't actually done really any training for it at all. But wow, it maybe skiing, if that counts as good training, a bit of cross training, then I've done some of that. But yeah, that's definitely the plan going forward now.
So, maybe a slightly strange question that we both didn't really envisage, but you've kind of a race that a lot of people may have been trying to qualify for years and years and years. Obviously, there's a new format to that now, which people realize through these series races, but you've gone and done that perhaps in an unexpected circumstance, and now you're going to go to Chamonix and do it. Is there any sort of like expectation around what you're going to do there? Did you think you'd ever go there? Is it something that's just an opportunity of a lifetime that perhaps you're not really come to terms with yet? Where are you at with it?
Yeah, I think probably everything that you've just said there is true. I almost feel a bit naughty, really, because wow, I will say this in a way, poor Charlie, because this is like a lifetime dream for him. And it's something that he's been aware of and wanted to do for years and years and years. So I think, bless him, when I kind of wandered in and got a place to the CCC straight off the back of the UTS, obviously he was made up for me, but he was a bit kind of like, oh, I wish I had one too. But the amazing news is he's actually qualified for UTMB through the ballot as well. So this is brilliant.
Awesome.
It means that we'll be going together.
Yeah,
Um,
no, I think when we recorded his episode, actually, because of UTS, obviously he got the chance to put in for the ballot, and he's obviously come out with a place, right?
yeah, and he was made up as well. Like he thought, no way was he going to get a place in the ballot because obviously it gets so many applicants, so your chances of getting through aren't always in your favour. But yeah, that's brilliant, and I think definitely it's the reality of it probably still hasn't really even sunk in yet that I'm actually going, because we watched it on TV for the
Yeah.
past couple of years and thought, oh wow, amazing. So yeah, the idea of going there and competing alongside some of the names that are going to be there is pretty mad.
Yeah, I know, crazy really when you think about it like that. And obviously all the Americans come over and they'll be able to come over this year for it, and all the guys like that. So I had Josh Wade on the show, who was the male winner of the 100K at UTS.
Yeah,
And he was sort of saying the same things really. It had been a dream of his, but he couldn't really, the fact that he was going to get to go was like an awesome experience that he hadn't really come to terms with yet.
yeah.
But for you guys going over there, are you going just for the race? Are you going to go for the whole kind of festival of it, or what's the plan?
I think we'd probably like to soak up the atmosphere a little bit and probably have a bit of acclimatization, a bit of a rest either side of it. Yeah, just absolutely make the most of being there.
Yeah, yeah. It's going to be a late shout. Luckily, one of our guys from our running club is qualified. I think they've got a big chalet that is a private one for them. So I'm
Oh my god,
hoping
amazing!
I'm hoping that's the case, and maybe there'll be a space to jump in late.
Wow.
But I can't guarantee I'll be there. It'd be nice to go, and hopefully do the same as what I've done at previous events and be on the other side of the fence with the camera and point it towards people's faces and get their thoughts while they're in the middle of a race. But, awesome. And, massive luck, good luck for that for both of you guys, because that'll be a real life, it could be a once in a lifetime experience. You just don't know.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. I think it could well be. And amazingly, one of my friends, really close friend who I did my physio training with, is also qualified for the CCC.
That's cool.
So that's lovely as well, because I think for us this year is going to be figuring out how running fits around work and our new jobs. So to be able to do that all together is amazing.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. So between now and then, what's the sort of plan around the training? Is it volume? Is it hills and elevation? What you sort of focusing on?
Yeah, sure. So hills and elevation is always kind of a massive part of our training. And I've got a good friend who's also a physio, and he was discussing with me recently how getting in lots of hills, lots of elevation is really complementary to some of the strength work that you might otherwise really need to do if you're doing more kind of flat style running all of the time. And like lots of runners, are not the best at doing my strength work, gym work, but that's definitely something that's stepped up recently, and that's something that I'd really like to kind of carry on put a bit more time into going forward. So yeah, definitely hills, strength work, and then just building some intensity and then putting some volume on top of that. There's a really good track session that Charlie might have mentioned when he was on here, actually, run by one of the local runners who's really at the top of his game, really fast marathon runner, Russell Bentley. So try and go to that as often as possible.
Try and get those adaptations.
Yeah,
and those gains. It sounds really good, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it's not on the bucket list myself. I think one day, why not? And listening to what you've got in place there and what you're planning to do sounds really exciting with what I do as a day job, and it just sounds like this adventure, the process of going through a training plan to get you to that start line. People talk about laps of honor for marathons. I mean, UTMB is not going to be a lap of honor for the training that you've done. It's totally different to a marathon, say. But the idea of going through this process of week one training, and then, like you said, the strength training, the hills, the volume on top of that, some speed work, all of those things. It just sounds like a great little adventure, and that's just to get you to the start line, and that's just part of the running process and the ultra world, I guess. But while we're on races, for you, is there anything sort of bucket list wise that you now that you're doing what you're doing, that you sort of look at and say, that's something I'd like to try?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think for me at the moment that the CCC is just the main thing on my focus. So that's the A race of the year. And then I'm doing the lap again in May this year. So that will kind of act as a really nice mini training block to split things up a bit. But yeah, in terms of, to be honest, in terms of dream races, probably CCC is up there. I had an absolute ball at the Ultra Trail Snowdonia, so I'd love to do that again one day in the future. And I guess I mean the furthest I've gone is 100k. I think it's one of those things that at the moment I don't really have a massive desire to go any further than that. But I'm sure at some point I'll probably get itchy feet and think maybe I'll try something a bit longer.
Yeah, that 100-mile question, it comes up a lot, really. I wasn't going to ask you that, but you've kind of touched on it. People like to talk about it a lot in the ultra world, I realise, but it's not I don't find it in an arrogant way when I'm in conversations with people that have done one. So I'm like you, I've done 100k, but I've not done I've done 70 miles, but just over 100k, but I've not gone to that 100-miler yet. But I notice that conversation a lot. You go to somewhere like the running show, or you go to UTS and you're on the side and you're talking to other ultra runners that aren't taking part, and the 100-mile conversation comes up. And I spent a bit of time at the Centurion Autumn 100, and all the volunteers were like past participants, and chatting through that 100-mile desire. It does seem to be, a lot of people do seem to have this pedestal and this desire to define their ultra running by whether they've done 100 miles or not. But hold on a minute, let's talk about U2S. When you go up, you're going up that sort of elevation and on that sort of course for 100K, that's epic, isn't it? That's epic enough, surely.
I mean, it definitely felt epic. And I think, you're making a really interesting point, because you can't just quantify a race by how long it is. There's so many other factors that come into play, like weather, elevation, terrain. So yeah, I think for me, the ingredients for the best race is a whole bunch of things, and scenery has to rate pretty highly up there. I think being able to go and see different places, or just see where you live from a different aspect, is incredible.
Which would have been something you got massively in lockdown, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
You know, to be honest, I think everyone did. Even if you live in Cambridge, you know, perhaps people bang on about Cambridge University. I've lived there my whole life, apart from uni, and you know, it's kind of, I'd never really noticed it before. But in lockdown, when I could run in the empty streets and no one was around, actually, I realised the kind of culture of Cambridge more and that history that we have here. But I'd previously not really been that aware of it, because it's just where I live. It's just where I'm from.
Yeah, for sure.
You know,
and I think so many people said similar things, of actually having life slow down a bit in those lockdowns was really beneficial in some ways, because it did give them a chance to kind of like stop a bit and notice other things, and not be rushing around their daily lives quite so much as usual.
Yeah, no, definitely. So talking about scenery, and what I wanted to talk to you about, you've touched on a couple of times, Windermere and Dynafit and the lap, you know.
Yeah.
So talk to me about that in general. So you guys also are associated with Dynafit. Tell me a bit about that. Tell me a bit about the lap as well, because it's something that definitely interests the running club that I'm part of. So yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so Dynafit they're originally a ski brand, but they've branched out into running over the past years, and they make absolutely incredible kit, which we're very lucky to benefit from, Charlie and I. And they also support a race, so this is the lap, that runs around Windermere in the Lake District, and you can do it in one direction in May, and then in September it reverses and goes in the other direction.
And I'll just hold you there on that, and that's a completely different race, right?
Yeah. Oh my god. Yeah. Like the extent to which it changes the race, just running it in reverse, is absolutely mad. It does feel like a completely different race. It's not like doing the same race, but just with a little twist on it. It does feel completely different.
Yeah, go on. Sorry, carry on.
Well, I think a lot of people have their real preference as well. If they've done it both years, I think it is nice to be able to compare it. I think a lot of people like the May, but I actually prefer the September. I really liked, and I was much faster in September, whereas the general trend seems to be faster in May. So it's quite
any particular reason why that way round?
Wow, I think I was trying to compete against another lady, and we were very much level pegging in September, so kind of toing and froing the whole time. So I think that definitely probably spurred us on both a little bit, probably got squeezed a bit extra out of us that day.
And what's the distance around that race?
That's 47 miles.
And it's got quite a lot of elevation, because there's a couple of big peaks there, isn't there?
Yeah. It's one of these races that there's kind of 3 major climbs in it, which I always quite like, because mentally chunking that into ticking the big climbs off, and then using those as big kind of markers for the course is lovely. That's definitely my kind of race. And yeah, like you say, beautiful scenery, getting up high and seeing these lovely views.
Yeah, I mean, I have been there, and you know, just without running, it's somewhere that people should go and get to experience, because it's just great scenery. You know, same with Snowdon as well. You know, Snowdonia, the whole area is, you know, if you've never been there, they should definitely go there, whether you're a runner or not. But,
Yeah.
you know, to get the chance to run around these places. I mean, my original journey was all triathlon, and I went to do the 70.3 down in the national park at Wimbleball Lake and in Exmoor National Park. And actually, one of the things I remember saying to my dad at the time was, look where this sport has brought me. You know, would we have really gone there? I don't know if we would have gone there without going there for that half Ironman event. I
Yeah.
think, I don't know if you agree, but ultra running definitely does that, right?
Yeah, and even on like a really small scale as well, is that you end up on these kind of random paths somewhere that if you weren't running, you just wouldn't see the kind of things that you see. And sometimes it can be, you know, you find these amazing little sections that are just trying to link two parts of a route up together. And I've never organised a race, but maybe race organisers feel this as well. You end up seeing these incredible things and these really quiet landscapes that is absolutely lovely. So yeah, definitely, absolutely.
And Dynafit wise, you know, I'll give you a little chance to talk about the brand and the clothing and the bits of kit. Do you like it? Do you get on with it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm a bit biased by receiving some support from them, but I have to say they're the best running kit that I've had. Absolutely, I think it looks lovely, which obviously very important, but it performs absolutely amazingly. There's so much design and research that gets put into the kit, so much testing. Yeah, I think for me, this might be a bit of a weird comparison, but Apple products, I think you can always tell that they're designed in the way that makes them super easy to use. They put so much research into the kind of psychology of how people use them. And I think for me, Dynafit's got that same aspect to it. The way in which it's going to be used is really well thought out. It's so comfortable, and it's really been tried and tested before it gets released to the market. And it's not been as available in the UK before as it has been now, but it's really increasing. So it's getting stocked in a store called Cribgoch in Wales, and Angus McKendrick, who lives in the Lakes and supports the Dynafit lap race. He's kind of responsible for the UK side of things and is absolutely brilliant, the most helpful, knowledgeable person about this stuff ever.
Yeah, no, I think we should. I talked to Charlie about it. We should get him on the show if he's
Yeah, I'm sure he'd love
available to
that.
do it. Because sometimes to get that kind of insight into the development of this stuff is really important. And I
Yeah,
did a sports science degree, and I'm really find sports science in all sports fascinating, but in particular the whole British cycling thing and the 1%. You know, back in the Olympics, back in Beijing and London, and
yeah.
how they changed things about the kit and everything to assist with the sport. It would be really good to perhaps maybe get some insight into that around the ultra running world and how it works and what they're doing to try and help the athlete and improve the performance within the kit itself.
I think, yeah, that's such a good point because it's definitely something that I don't really know about as an individual. Like, I've got absolutely no knowledge in that side of things. But like you say, when gains can be so marginal, it's fantastic to have that kind of idea. And especially like down to things like shoes and trainers, when you've got potential of kind of injury risk, especially over these really, really long races, and kind of big volume training miles, having the right footwear that you feel comfortable in, that's going to protect you, and it's going to be nice and grippy or appropriate for whatever conditions you're running in. So absolutely critical. And I think, again, that's something that Dynafit A, design really well, but also B, it's amazing to talk to Angus about these things, and he can actually educate me on what I need to be doing rather than me just picking a pair of shoes because they look nice.
Yeah, which I think when every runner starts we can all be caught sort of guilty of doing that. Yeah, no, cool. So going back to what you said right at the start, you kind of mentioned given the right maybe environment and tools that you think anyone could really go for an ultra. What would be your sort of top 3 tips for someone to even start this process then?
I think gradual goals would definitely be tip number one, because an ultra is such a huge undertaking that it might feel a bit overwhelming and kind of can put someone off before they start. But one of the things I love that the sport's taught me is that these things do feel huge, and you can just break them down and gradually take it on. And then the sense of achievement after that is amazing. So yeah, definitely kind of work backwards from that big goal you have and set those little smaller goals to help you get there and stay consistent. I think number 2 would be enjoy it is the main thing. And I think Charlie and I have had this conversation a lot where we've probably overtrained in the past, and maybe gone too hard and not looked after ourselves enough on the recovery side of things and the nutrition and the sleeping. And I think that can become overwhelming in itself and kind of take the fun out of it. It just becomes more about more training. And at the end of the day, it's a hobby. It's something that you do for pleasure, for enjoyment, or to make yourself feel good in some way. So if that's not happening, then what's the point?
Yeah. Yeah.
And what would be my third tip for getting started on I'll probably actually say just nutrition itself. It is a huge one. I think maybe the running side of things and the training side of things is a bit more accessible to lots of people. Like you can talk to other people that you know who run or like follow a training plan. That's quite easy to find. But I'd say, especially going up to the ultra distance, what you eat and when you eat as well is so important to just helping you feel good the rest of the time and recovering and be able to go again and feel good. So yeah, those would be my big 3 pillars.
Yeah, no, and they're really cool. I like the reverse engineering idea of that gradual goal work back towards that beginning point and where you are now, and then taking those gradual steps to then actually be ready, almost based around what you then elaborated on in point 2, so that you don't maybe overtrain and that you do enjoy the process and that there is a process to it and that enjoyment factor. And then, I think your third point as well ties in really nicely with it, because probably without that third point, overtraining, that syndrome of fatigue, constant central fatigue, and not being able to work through those gradual goals, if you're not fueling it, you're not going to be able to do it. So great, what a really good snapshot, I think, for anyone who's listening that is maybe at that marathon distance and is thinking, 23, let's go for it, let's step up. Those 3 points, I think they're brilliant, and I think there's something that people could take away. But no, awesome. So thanks very much, Rhi. It's been really insightful, whether it be the park run sort of research that you did, or and how you got into it, talking about UTMB and how that process is going to work, and then sort of the lap and your thoughts on that. I think it's been a great episode and great for me to sort of learn a lot from you there as well, and hopefully the listeners and the viewers will feel the same as well. So really appreciate your time and you coming on. If anyone did want to follow this journey, do you have any public channels that people could follow you on?
Yeah, sure. So probably the best one is my Instagram, which is Life of Rhi 93.
Cool.
And Rhi is spelled RHI.
Cool. We'll whack that in the description on everything as well, so people can simply click on it as well. But no, thanks for your time and thanks for coming on. That's been great, and it's a great way to relaunch this show and get us back out there, and hopefully plenty of people will agree with those tips and maybe take them on board and use them. So thanks very much for coming.
Thanks so much for having me.
Cool, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you've enjoyed listening to what Rhi had to say. We will be back with another show very soon. If you did enjoy the show, could you please share it? Please like it. Please write a comment. It's great to know your thoughts on anything that we spoke about today, and any questions you might have around it, because it might be something that future guests can address as well, especially if they've done certain races, or if there's any sort of training tips that you might particularly need. We can always look at those questions. So do comment, do share with anyone that you think might want it as well. But for today, Rhi and I are going to say goodbye to you, and we hope that you've enjoyed your time, and I hope that we can meet here again next time on the Ultra Running Podcast.